Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard all over again. While Heard says the multi-million-dollar defamation case will have a chilling effect on domestic abuse survivors, she fires back at ex-Johnny Depp just 1 month after his formal appeal was made. It was the most watched trial in Law&Crime Network's history and the one that launched this very podcast. But could Amber Heard and Johnny Depp be headed back to court? Let's bring in Depp and Heard expert and trial attorney Katherine Lizardo. Now, Katherine, you and I have actually gotten to know each other well through this very case. I know you watched it gavel to gavel and have been covering it for months. We're now hearing that Amber Heard's team appealed the more than $10 million verdict. But explain this to me. I thought this already happened.
Yes, a lot of people were getting confused about the appeal. And what happened was after the trial, after the verdict was reached, Amber Heard actually filed post-trial motions. And her motion there, it was asking Judge Escarati in her court still to reverse the jury verdict and just basically say that that is not supported by the law. But that was in Judge Escarati's court. It was not considered an appeal. Now she is officially appealing in the Virginia Court of Appeals, and that's where we find ourselves in.
Okay, now this brief we took a look at, it references the United Kingdom trial. You and I have discussed this extensively here on Law&Crime Network. Now, there are a lot of differences in these two trials that people don't always realize. But if we take a look at that brief of Heard's recent appeal, it reads in part, quote, "This case should never have gone to trial because another court had already concluded that Depp abused Heard on multiple occasions. After Depp filed this case, the United Kingdom High Court of Justice ruled in a separate defamation action brought by Depp that Heard's abuse allegations were true." Now, Katherine, can you break this down for us? Does that UK verdict really warrant the verdict being overturned here in the US or even a new trial?
I believe it does not. Like you mentioned, we've discussed this before extensively, and two glaring reasons as to why the UK judgment does not apply here in the United States. One, the parties were different. The UK trial was between Johnny Depp and the Sun, and Amber Heard was not a party to that. Second, the evidentiary rules in the UK is different from the US. Now, I want to add two more reasons that are glaringly not in Amber Heard's appeal, which is one, she did not provide any supporting law as to why a UK judgment would apply in the US, why a judgment in another country would apply in the US. And second, in the UK, the rebuttal witnesses who were critical in Johnny Depp's trial here in the US were not there. So those two are really big issues that separates the UK and the US trial.
Yeah, that's really good to point out those two differences that a lot of people here in the US had only followed the US case and hadn't even really taken a look at the UK case. But it makes sense because it's a different country. They have different laws. It doesn't really affect this case as much in the US as Heard's team may point out. But Heard also said in that opening part of the brief, quote, "It will undoubtedly have a chilling effect on other women who wish to speak about abuse involving powerful men." So we did see Amber Heard painted as a villain for much of the trial back in April, May, and into June. Do you think that her point here is powerful, that it will have a chilling impact on other abuse survivors?
After the trial, she did have a lot of vitriol messages against her because of, I believe, that affected her credibility at the trial, which was significantly adversely affected. And I'm understating that, of course, based on the comments after the trial. And I want to take this opportunity to say that the law must always protect and ensure that there is no chilling effect to all victims who speak against abuse, whether that's a woman victim, a male victim, or a child victim. But we have to remember as well that freedom of speech does not protect all speeches, and defamation is not protected by our First Amendment. So defamation, if you say something that's not true, that is not a protected speech. And here, the jury found that she actually defamed Johnny Depp with actual malice. And because they are public figures, there was that added element of actual malice that they both had to overcome. And the jury found that she acted with actual malice when she published that op-ed.
So, Katherine, we've talked about this for months. Everybody loved to watch that trial as trial watchers. But what are really the odds of Johnny Depp and Amber Heard actually heading back to court?
Well, in terms of heading back to court as to a new trial, I find that very slim. Right now, we're in the appeals process, and they both have parallel appeals. Amber Heard has her own appeal, and Johnny Depp has his own appeal. He's appealing his award against him of $2 million for one of the statements that Adam Waldman stated, and the jury found to be against him. So those appeals will last for quite a while, even possibly a few years. The briefing schedule right now in terms of what happens next is Amber Heard will have to, after she filed her opening brief, then Johnny Depp has to file his reply brief, and then Amber Heard has to file her response brief. So we still have quite a while to go, and then the Court of Appeals would have to issue its own written decision. So we'll see by the end of probably next year as to what happens with Amber Heard's appeal.
Yeah, so it's very interesting that even after this monumental verdict came down, there's still back and forth between Depp and Heard in the form of these filings. What do you think we could expect from Depp's team in this reply that you just referenced?
I think they will really be able to argue a lot against Amber Heard's opening brief. The reason I say that is because Amber Heard's opening brief crammed 16 assignment of errors, and that's a lot of issues in appeal to put on their limited 55-page brief, which did not really allow them that much opportunity to provide a lot of support, a lot of extensive argument and law. I think Johnny Depp's team will capitalize on that limitation.
Is there any way that this could play out in Amber Heard's favor? Is she just going to go through the list of all the things to do so she can, quote unquote, win one? Or what do you think about that?
Well, I think she has some arguments that are interesting, and I will reserve some of that thought until all the briefing schedules are out. But I think her argument about the jury instructions might be something that the Court of Appeals will look at, because jury instruction issues are always something that Court of Appeals judges have a heightened sense of awareness and just wanting to make sure that those proper laws were given to the jury so they can properly get to the verdict that they reached here.
So I know we've been focusing on Amber Heard's appeal, but we did mention that Depp's side, on his side of things, an appeal was also filed. We touched on this very briefly, but I just want to make sure that we really can understand the differences between what Heard is appealing and what Depp is appealing. So what are the differences here? What is Depp actually appealing?
Well, for Amber Heard, we see that she's appealing the entire verdict against her, the 10.35 million verdict, and a lot of evidentiary issues. She is appealing that the jurisdiction, the forum nonconvenience, precludes this trial, Judge Scarlatti's trial, from happening in Virginia, that it should not have been filed in Virginia. Those are just some things. As I mentioned, she actually had 16 assignment of errors, and assignment of errors are the errors she believed that Judge Scarlatti's court committed during the trial. 16, that's a lot. Johnny Depp, on the other hand, had 3 assignment of errors, and all of them actually are focused on one particular issue, which is whether or not the verdict about Adam Waldman's statement that there was a hoax with the 911 call, that one the jury found to be against Johnny Depp, and that's the only thing he's appealing there. So it's very laser focused as to whether Adam Waldman's statement as a lawyer should be imputed on Johnny Depp as a client.
It's very interesting the way that you pointed that out, that Depp's, you called it laser focused. It's one specific thing that we're talking about, the Waldman statements we heard about so much at the trial. And then Heard, it's a very broad aspect. I think you said 16 different points. So quite a few on Heard's end. Well, Katherine, thank you for staying with Law&Crime Network, following this really from the beginning. And as we continue into appeals, it's always great to have you on. And it was great talking with you today.
Thank you for having me. If you learned something new from this video, please go ahead and click subscribe. And if you have any questions or any legal topics that you'd like me to cover, feel free to go ahead and place that in the comments below, and I'll try my best to make a YouTube video out of that. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!